Have you ever heard, the old market women would ask as they hushed their voices and leaned closer over baskets of ripe plantains, of the man who called a woman lazy and she saved his life a week later? They would tell it as a whisper, as if the city itself was still listening, because this story did not happen in the faraway days of kings and warriors, but here, among us, in the roar of traffic, the glow of phone screens, and the smell of roasted corn on dusty evening streets. Chijioke Nadozi, known around the city of Adenla as Mr. Do-It-All, believed that success came only to those who never rested. That morning, he strutted through the busy intersection wearing a crisp white shirt, navy blue suit trousers, and brown Italian loafers that caught the sunlight like coins. A silver wristwatch winked on his wrist every time he gestured, and his tie, an Ankara print with golden spirals, announced that he had taste and wealth. People admired him, or at least pretended to. His staff at Blue Rise Digital, a tech startup he had built from scratch, called him Boss C. They envied how he walked with confidence, how his voice filled the air like the hum of an expensive car. But what they didn't see, what he refused to see, was how his pride made him blind. At the entrance of Blue Rise Digital, an elderly woman sat every day. She wore a faded Ankara wrapper, a soft yellow blouse with tiny tears on the sleeves, and rubber slippers so worn they looked thin as paper. Her name was Mama Nkem. To most people, she was invisible. Some said she was too lazy to work. Others whispered she was waiting for handouts. She sold roasted groundnuts in a small calabash and sometimes dozed off under the almond tree beside the gate. That morning, as Chijioke's car pulled up, Mama Nkem smiled and waved. "Good morning, my son," she said warmly. Chijioke barely glanced at her. "Mama, don't block the gate," he said sharply, adjusting his suit jacket. "Find something useful to do. Always sitting there. Do you think life will pity you?" His words were like stones. The woman's smile faded, but she said nothing. She simply adjusted her headscarf, lifted her calabash of nuts, and murmured softly, "Ego be, my son. The wind will tell." He didn't understand what she meant. He didn't care to. Adenla was a city that never slept. At night, the sky turned purple from the reflection of lights. People rushed through life, chasing dreams, chasing money, chasing everything except peace. That evening, Chijioke met with his business partners at the Monarch Lounge, an upscale restaurant where the music was soft and the prices were loud. He wore a black turtleneck, grey trousers and leather sneakers, blending luxury with ease. They toasted to a new deal, one that promised millions, but among his partners sat Tunde, a man with a smile too perfect and a heart too crooked. Unknown to Chijioke, Tunde had been plotting to sell the company's biggest contract behind his back. While the laughter flowed and champagne glasses clinked, Mama Nkem sat under the streetlight outside his office, softly singing an old Igbo folk song to herself. Her voice floated into the night like a whisper carried by ancestors. The next morning, Chijioke was late to work for the first time in years. His car refused to start. Angry, he stormed out of his house in a white polo, dark jeans and black loafers, taking a bike instead. When he arrived, Mama Nkem was there as always, but this time she looked at him differently. Her eyes were calm but knowing. "Good morning, my son," she said. "I dreamt of you last night. You must not travel this week. Danger follows the wind." Chijioke chuckled dryly. "Mama, please, dreams don't sign contracts." She touched his arm gently. Her fingers were thin but firm. "Listen to old words before you call them foolish. Not every danger shows its face." He shrugged her off. "Mama, you're always talking in riddles. I have a meeting in Abuja next week. Nothing will happen." Mama Nkem sighed and returned to her nuts. So you say. But remember, you called me lazy. Let us see who runs faster than fate." Her words lingered like incense, but he ignored them. A week later, despite his mechanic warning him that his car's brakes were wearing out, Chijioke set off early in the morning for Abuja. He wore a sky-blue shirt, tailored black trousers, and polished brown shoes. His suitcase matched his ambition, sleek, expensive, and heavy with documents that could change his life. He drove past the almond tree and saw Mama Nkem sitting quietly, her wrapper a patchwork of blues and reds that shimmered faintly in the sunrise. She lifted her hand and called out, "My son, wait!" But he didn't. The city was waking, his phone was buzzing, and ambition was louder than warning. The road out of Adenla twisted like a snake through green hills. Halfway through the journey, clouds began to gather. His phone rang. It was Tunde. "Boss C, how far? Everything on track?" Chijioke smiled proudly. "On track, my brother. By this time tomorrow we'll both be celebrating." Tunde laughed, but behind that laugh was betrayal. As the rain began to fall, Chijioke's wipers struggled. His phone buzzed again, this time a text from an unknown number. "Don't go further. Stop now. The road remembers you." He frowned. The message felt strange. He looked up and saw it too late. A trailer skidded across the lane, brakes screaming. Chijioke swerved. His car spun, hit the guardrail, and plunged into a shallow ditch. Darkness, silence, then faintly singing. When he woke, everything hurt. Rain dripped on his face. He tried to move, but his leg was pinned. His vision blurred, and there she was. Mama Nkem, her wrapper soaked, her headscarf clinging to her wet hair, kneeling beside the wreck. "My son," she said softly, "you didn't wait." He could barely speak. "Mama, how did you—" "I told you the wind would tell," she whispered. "I saw the rain in my sleep and followed it. Get up, we must go before the fire catches." With strength that defied her frail body, she dragged him from the car. Moments later, the vehicle burst into flames. The fire painted the rain red, and the woman he once called lazy stood against it like a guardian spirit. Later, at the hospital, Chijioke opened his eyes to see Mama Nkem sitting by his bed. She wore a clean Ankara blouse, a new wrapper, and blue sandals someone had bought for her. "Why did you save me?" he asked weakly. She smiled. "Because even when you call the sun lazy, it still rises." Tears welled in his eyes. "I was wrong about you." Mama Nkem nodded slowly. "Perhaps, but sometimes we are meant to meet our own words on the road." She stood, adjusting her headscarf. "Rest, my son. The wind has finished its message." And just like that, she was gone. But people still see her sometimes, under the almond tree at the Blue Rise gate, her wrapper brighter than before, her smile softer, selling groundnuts that never seem to run out. Some say she's human, others whisper she's spirit, but one thing everyone in Adenla agrees on: never call a woman lazy until you've seen how fast she can run when fate is chasing you. The old women of Adenla would say that some trees remember what people forget. They would point to the almond tree that stood at the gate of Blue Rise Digital, its branches heavy with glossy green leaves and fruits that birds fought over. "That tree," they whispered, "has seen life come and go. It listens when people mock the wind." And under that very tree, Mama Nkem had sat for 7 years, waiting, watching, listening. It had been 2 weeks since the accident. Chijioke Nadozi, still limping slightly, arrived at his office for the first time since the crash. He wore a simple white kaftan, black leather sandals, and a blue Ankara cap. No tie, no watch, no pride. The gatekeeper, surprised, bowed slightly. "Welcome back, sir. We thank God you're alive." Chijioke smiled weakly. "We thank God indeed." His eyes drifted to the base of the almond tree, and there she was. Mama Nkem, in a brightly patterned Ankara dress with orange swirls, her wrapper tied neatly, and flat canvas shoes, sat behind her small wooden tray of groundnuts. She was humming softly to herself, her headscarf fluttering in the breeze. When she saw him, she smiled, not with surprise, but with the calmness of someone who already knew he would come. "Good morning, my son," she said. Chijioke bent slightly, an act that shocked the passers-by. "Good morning, Mama." He reached into his pocket, brought out an envelope and offered it to her. "Please take this. It's not enough for what you did, but—" She raised her hand. "Keep it. The wind already paid me." He frowned. "Mama, what does that even mean?" She chuckled softly, rearranging her nuts. "The wind brings what belongs to you, my son. It took your pride and returned your breath. Fair exchange, isn't it?" Before he could reply, the wind actually blew, lifting dust, leaves, and something else. A small piece of paper fluttered out of her calabash, landing at his feet. On it was written a name, Tunde Olawale. Inside the office, everything seemed normal, too normal. The staff greeted him warmly, some genuinely relieved, others pretending. Tunde was among the first to step forward. He wore a slim-fit navy suit, white shirt, and gold cufflinks. His cologne announced his presence before his words did. "Boss C, my brother, thank God for your life, oh. We heard the story. God is good." Chijioke smiled, though his heart was cold. Yes, God is indeed good. He noticed Tunde's wristwatch, the same brand and color as the one that had gone missing from his car after the crash. Something twisted in his stomach. Later that day, when the office emptied out, he went through the records of the Abuja contract. The signature looked off, and the attached payment receipt was dated 2 days before the accident. Someone had already collected the advance. Someone named Tunde Olawale. Chijioke's hands trembled. So, this is what she meant. Danger follows the wind. He sat back, his mind replaying every moment. Tunde's laughter at the restaurant, his convenient phone call before the crash, the mysterious text message, and now the piece of paper that somehow appeared in Mama Nkem's tray. It wasn't coincidence. It was a message. That night, Chijioke returned to the almond tree. The street was quiet, the light soft, and the air smelled faintly of roasted corn. Mama Nkem sat there as always, this time in a deep green Ankara blouse and a plain brown wrapper, her feet in old slippers, and her eyes sharp like someone reading invisible pages in the air. He crouched beside her. "Mama, who are you really?" She laughed, her voice low and warm. "I'm an old woman selling groundnuts. That is all." "No," he said firmly. "No ordinary woman walks through a storm to save a man trapped in fire. No ordinary woman knows things she shouldn't know." Mama Nkem looked toward the almond tree, then back at him. "Do you see this tree, my son? It was planted on the day you were born." He blinked. "What?" She nodded. "Your mother came here, heavy with you in her belly. She rested under its shade when the sun was cruel. I sold her groundnuts too, though she did not buy. She said, 'When my son grows, he will climb this tree.' And I said, 'May the wind watch over him.'" Chijioke stared, stunned. How do you remember that?" Mama Nkem smiled faintly. "Because I have been here longer than you've been alive, longer than most who walk this street." Her gaze softened. "Your mother's kindness planted something in me. When she died, I promised the wind I would look after her child." He swallowed hard. "So you've been watching me all these years?" "Watching? No, guarding maybe. But even the wind can only warn, not stop the foolishness of youth." He felt both humbled and unsettled. "Mama, Tunde, my business partner, he betrayed me. How did you know?" She pointed to the almond tree. "The tree listens. It hears lies that people think are whispers." The next morning, Chijioke returned with evidence. Forged documents, bank alerts, fake contracts, everything pointing to Tunde's betrayal. He went to Mama Nkem again. She was wearing a red and gold Ankara gown, her hair wrapped in a matching scarf, her feet in rubber slippers. "What should I do now?" he asked. She poured some groundnuts into his palm. "Eat first." He obeyed, unsure why. "The taste is bitter," he said. She nodded. "That is how truth tastes before it frees you." Then, without warning, she reached into her tray and pulled out a small charm, a tiny pouch tied with palm fiber. "This is not for magic," she said quickly, seeing his fear. "It is for courage." "Courage?" "Yes. Go and face him, but do not shout. The wind cannot blow where anger leads." That afternoon, Chijioke summoned Tunde into the conference room. He wore a plain grey shirt, black chinos, and ankle boots. Simple, grounded, unthreatening. Tunde strolled in, confident as always, his navy blazer perfectly pressed, his ankara tie bright, and his smile too wide. "Boss, you wanted to see me?" "Yes." Chijioke slid the forged documents across the table. "Care to explain?" Tunde froze. The color drained from his face. "Boss, I can—" "Don't!" Silence thickened. The hum of the air conditioner sounded like thunder. Finally, Tunde slumped into a chair. "It wasn't supposed to go that far. I just needed the money for a while. I thought you'd never find out." Chijioke leaned forward. "The brakes on my car failed the same day you transferred the funds. Tell me, was that also by mistake?" Tunde's eyes widened. He stammered, "I swear, I didn't touch your car. I swear." But his voice faltered. And then, suddenly, the windows rattled. A gust of wind rushed through the room, fierce and cold. Papers flew into the air. Chijioke didn't move. He only said quietly, "The wind remembers everything." Tunde ran out of the office that day. No one saw him again. The next morning his apartment was found empty, except for one thing, a piece of almond bark carved into the shape of a woman's face. Weeks passed. The company recovered. The scandal faded. But Mama Nkem still sat under the almond tree, wearing her colorful Ankara wrappers and smiling at anyone who looked lost. One evening, as the sun bled into orange, Chijioke sat beside her with 2 cups of zobo. "Mama," he said softly, "how can I repay you?" She chuckled, "By remembering what you forgot." "What's that?" "That the wind owes no one. It only carries what you sow." He nodded slowly. "And the almond tree?" She looked up at the rustling leaves. "Ah, the tree keeps secrets, but it never forgets those who change." She took a sip of zobo, sighed, and said, "Now, tell me, my son, do you still think I'm lazy?" He laughed through tears. "No, Mama, you are the strongest woman I've ever known." And the wind whispered through the almond leaves, soft, approving, eternal. It started as gossip, of course. It always does. 2 street sweepers near the junction swore they had seen Mama Nkem standing in the rain, her bright orange Ankara gown dry as dust, her feet bare, her wrapper shimmering like mist. They said she was talking to the wind, and the wind was answering. Others claimed that since the day Tunde Olawale vanished, no one dared mock her again. Her groundnuts sold faster than ever. Her smile seemed to draw good luck. Even the bank nearby had fewer robberies, as if the air around her kept evil at bay. But Chijioke Nadozie knew better than to call it rumor. He had seen what the wind could do. It was a Saturday morning when curiosity overcame him. He decided to visit Mama Nkem at home. She had always seemed rooted to the almond tree, like she belonged there. But when he asked the nearby shopkeeper for her address, the man frowned. "Mama Nkem? Ah, she lives near the old railway quarters. But," he scratched his head, "that woman's been there longer than anyone. Some say she came before the roads." So Chijioke went, dressed simply in a white linen shirt, black jeans and brown loafers. He carried a basket of fruits, mangoes, oranges, apples, and a small bottle of palm wine. The road led him to the edge of the city, where the buildings thinned and the air smelled of earth and rain. At the end stood a small house made of clay and corrugated iron sheets. Smoke curled from the back, birds perched on the fence, unafraid. When he knocked, the door opened before his knuckles touched it. Mama Nkem stood there, wearing a deep blue wrapper, a white blouse and a red headscarf that gleamed like a flame. She smiled. "Ah, my son, you have followed the wind again." He bowed lightly. "Mama, I came to thank you properly and to ask a few things." She stepped aside. "Then come in. The wind has ears, but it also likes company." Inside was simple but filled with presence, as though the air itself carried stories. Clay pots lined the walls. Dried herbs hung from the rafters. A wooden stool sat near a small altar covered in white cloth. On the altar were strange things, an old photograph, a faded baby's shoe, a broken bangle, and a piece of almond bark. Chijioke's eyes widened. "Mama, that's—" She nodded. "Yes, from the tree." He hesitated. "Why keep it here?" She looked at the bark lovingly. "Every tree has a spirit. This one carries mine." He frowned slightly. "Yours?" She smiled faintly. "I was born under it, you see. Many years ago, before Adenla had roads and billboards, there was a village here. They called it Umwocha, the children of light. My mother was a midwife. When she gave birth to me, the wind blew so fiercely that people said I came with it. Since then, wherever I go, the wind follows." Chijioke felt a shiver. "You mean you're older than the city?" Mamankum chuckled softly. "Age is just a number to those who count with clocks. The earth counts differently." He sat, uncertain whether to believe or doubt. "Why me, Mama?" he asked finally. "Why save me?" Her eyes softened. "Because once, long ago, your father saved me." It happened, she told him, more than 30 years earlier. Back then she was not Mama Nkem, but a young woman named Nkemdilim, full of fire and dreams. She wore colorful Ankara skirts, bright head wraps, and golden bangles that jingled when she laughed. She had come to the city to work as a seamstress, stitching clothes for wealthy women who looked down on her. One night on her way home, a fire broke out in her neighborhood. People ran, screams filled the air. Her small room was trapped between two burning houses. It was Emeka Nadozi, a young trader, who broke the door and pulled her out. Chijioke's breath caught. "My father?" "Yes," Mama Nkem said softly. "He was brave, but humble. When I tried to thank him, he said, 'One day, when the wind blows the wrong way, help someone who reminds you of me.'" Her voice trembled, like a song half remembered. "He died a year later. But the wind doesn't forget promises. When I saw you standing so proud at that gate, I saw his face in yours." She smiled gently. "That is why I stayed by the almond tree, waiting for the day I could return the favor." Chijioke's throat tightened. "So, the accident, my life. Was the wind's debt being paid?" she finished. "It took a father. It gave a son." As if her words had summoned it, thunder cracked outside. The sky darkened and rain began to fall, hard and sudden. Mama Nkem stood, tying her wrapper tighter. "Ah, the wind is restless tonight." Chijioke looked outside. The trees bent wildly. "Should I help you close the windows?" She shook her head. "No, my son. This storm isn't here for me. It's here for you." Lightning flashed, and through the window, Chijioke saw something impossible. The almond tree, miles away at the Blue Rise Gate, shimmered in the distance as though it were made of light. "Mama," he whispered, "what's happening?" She walked to the altar and picked up the almond bark. "The tree is calling. Something is coming for what it lost." He felt a chill. What did it lose? She turned slowly, her eyes now glowing faintly like fireflies. The truth. Before he could ask more, his phone rang. It was Adaora, his operations manager. "Sir!" Her voice trembled through the static. "You need to come to the office. Someone broke in. The servers are gone. The safe is empty." The line cut off. Chijioke's heart pounded. He stood quickly. "Mama, I have to go." She nodded calmly. "Then take this." She pressed the piece of almond bark into his hand. "It will remember you when the wind forgets." He ran out into the storm, the wind lashing his clothes, a dark raincoat, black trousers, and wet leather shoes. He could barely see the road, but somehow the wind seemed to guide him. When he reached Blue Rise Digital, the gate was open, lights flickering. The almond tree's branches swayed violently. Inside he saw shadows, 3 men loading equipment into a van. One of them turned. It was Tunde Olawale, alive and smiling. "Tunde!" Chijioke shouted, rain dripping from his hair. Tunde froze. You were supposed to die." Chijioke stepped forward, clutching the almond bark. The wind disagreed. Thunder rolled like a drumbeat. The almond tree outside groaned. Suddenly, a gust tore through the open door. Papers flew, lights burst, and the wind howled like a living thing. Tunde tried to run, but the wind slammed the door shut. "Stop fighting!" Maman Kem's voice echoed faintly, though she wasn't there. "The wind only collects what it is owed." Tunde screamed as the almond bark in Chijioke's hand glowed. The lights flickered, and when they steadied, the men were gone. Only the van remained, doors open, equipment untouched. Outside, the storm quieted. Chijioke stood alone, soaked, trembling, but alive. And in the silence that followed, the almond leaves rustled softly, like hands clapping. By dawn, the police came. They found no trace of the thieves. The servers were intact, the safe unopened. Chijioke told no one what really happened. He only went back to the almond tree. There, under its shade, sat Maman Kem, dry as always, wearing a gold Ankara gown with silver earrings and woven sandals. "You came back," she said, smiling. "I had to," he replied, kneeling slightly. "The wind owes no one, right?" She nodded. "And now, the wind's debt is paid." He smiled sadly. "Will I see you tomorrow?" She looked up at the tree. "Maybe, maybe not, but you'll feel me when the wind passes." And as he blinked, the space where she sat shimmered and emptied. Only the scent of roasted groundnuts lingered. That evening the almond tree dropped a single leaf, shaped like a heart. Chijioke caught it before it touched the ground. A week passed after Maman Kem vanished, and yet Chijioke Nadozi still came to the almond tree every morning. He would park his car beside the curb, step out in his light blue agbada with embroidered cuffs, his black leather sandals, and simply stand there, listening. The hum of the city swelled around him, honking taxis, laughing schoolchildren, the soft hiss of frying akara. But he heard nothing from her. No laughter, no humming, no sound of groundnuts being poured into a paper cone. The wooden stool she had sat on was gone. The patch of sand where her calabash had always rested looked strangely untouched, as if time itself avoided it. And though the almond tree still stood firm, its leaves no longer whispered when he passed. She was gone, but deep in his chest he felt something still watching him, something unseen, something gentle, like breath on the back of his neck. In the months that followed, Blue Rise Digital flourished. Under Chijioke's leadership, now steadied by humility and patience, the company became one of Adenla's fastest-growing tech firms. He treated his workers with kindness, paying fair wages and listening before judging. When he entered the office, he no longer wore the arrogant gleam of superiority. Instead, he favored simple kaftans, Ankara-trimmed jackets and comfortable sneakers, his attire a reflection of the man he was becoming. One afternoon during a meeting, Adaora, his operations manager, smiled. "Sir, you've changed," he chuckled softly. "People say the wind changes too, but it's still the wind," Adaora grinned. "Whatever happened that night at the office, I think it changed all of us." Chijioke nodded, glancing at the almond tree swaying outside the window. "It did. Some debts can't be measured in money." 3 months later, on a quiet Saturday, a young woman appeared at the Blue Rise gate. She wore a bright yellow Ankara dress, patterned with blue flowers, white sneakers, and a woven handbag slung across her shoulder. Her eyes were deep and steady, the kind that saw more than they should. "Good morning," she said to the gatekeeper. "Please, I'm looking for Mr. Chijioke." He led her upstairs. When Chijioke saw her, his breath caught. There was something familiar in the way she carried herself, calm, deliberate, yet alive like wind in tall grass. "Good morning, sir," she greeted, bowing slightly. "My name is Nkemdelim Okafor. I was told you needed a new receptionist." He blinked. "Your name?" "Nkemdelim." She nodded. "Yes, sir. My friends call me Nkem." For a moment the world felt still. He gestured for her to sit. She wore a yellow dress that shimmered faintly when she moved. A blue beaded bracelet circled her wrist, identical to one he had once seen on Mama Nkem's altar. He cleared his throat. "You look familiar." She smiled politely. "Maybe I remind you of someone." Something in her tone, not the words but the rhythm, stirred memory. It was the same soft cadence Mama Nkem used when she said, "The wind owes no one." He exhaled slowly. "You're hired." From that day on, Nkemdelim became a quiet but powerful presence in Blue Rise. She arrived early every morning, her bright Ankara dresses brightening the office, her headscarves changing colors like seasons. Whenever Chijioke faced difficult choices, she would appear at his door with tea or advice that always seemed one step ahead of time. One afternoon, after a frustrating client meeting, he sighed. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm even doing the right thing anymore." Nkemdelim smiled, adjusting her turquoise head wrap. "The wind doesn't ask the trees for direction, sir. It just moves, and the world rearranges itself around it." He stared at her. "Where did you hear that?" She tilted her head. "It just came to me." He smiled faintly. "You sound like someone I used to know." She laughed lightly. Maybe the wind brought her voice back. That evening, as she left, a sudden gust of wind swept through the corridor. Papers flew, and for a heartbeat, he caught the faint scent of roasted groundnuts. One morning, months later, Nkemdelim brought him a small brown package. "For you, sir," she said. He frowned. "What's this?" "Open it." Inside was a single almond leaf, pressed between glass, framed in wood. Beneath it, written in delicate cursive, were the words, "The wind remembers." He swallowed hard. "Where did you get this?" Nkemdelim shrugged. "It was on my doorstep this morning. No note, just that." He stared at her for a long time. "Do you believe in fate?" She smiled, her yellow dress glowing softly under the sunlight. "I believe in the wind, sir. It carries what's meant to find us." That day he hung the frame in his office, right above his desk. Every time the air conditioner blew gently, the glass would hum faintly, like a quiet laugh. Every year, Adenla held a festival, Iri Ife, the Feast of the Winds. It celebrated survival, change, and gratitude. That year, the festival committee chose Blue Rise Digital as a major sponsor. Chijioke decided to attend, dressed in a white senator outfit with a red cap, black loafers, and a beaded wristband. When he arrived, the streets were alive, dancers twirling in colorful Ankara costumes, drummers beating rhythms that made the air itself tremble. Vendors sold palm wine, puff-puff, roasted corn. And then, amidst the crowd, he saw her. Not Nkemdelim, Mama Nkem. Standing by the almond tree in the town square, wearing a flowing blue wrapper that moved like clouds, her headscarf golden, her eyes radiant. He blinked. The crowd shifted. She was gone. Heart-pounding, he turned, and there stood Nkemdelim, smiling softly, holding a cup of zobo. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she teased. He shook his head slowly. "Maybe I have." She handed him the drink. "Ghosts are just memories with unfinished work." When the festival drums reached their peak, a sudden gust swept through the streets, strong, joyous, alive. Balloons flew, ribbons danced, people laughed, and in that wind he heard it again, her voice faint but clear. The wind owes no one. He closed his eyes. Tears slipped down his cheeks unnoticed. When he opened them, Nkemdilim was still beside him, her yellow dress glowing under the festival lights. He whispered, "Thank you." She smiled, looking up at the dancing leaves. "Don't thank me, sir. Thank the wind." Years later, when Blue Rise Digital expanded into new cities, Chijioke made a quiet decision. He built a small park in front of the company's headquarters, surrounding the ancient almond tree with benches, flowers, and a plaque that read, "In honor of Mama Nkem, the woman who listened to the wind." Every year on her birthday, the day of the storm, the employees gathered there to share food, laughter, and stories. Some said if you stayed long enough, the tree would whisper softly in the evening breeze. Others swore they saw a woman's shadow, a figure in Ankara, headscarf fluttering, sandals gliding over the dust, watching, smiling, waiting. And if you ever passed by the gate on a quiet night, you might hear her laughter in the rustling leaves. The woman he once called lazy had become something else entirely. She had become the wind. Years passed. Chijioke Nadozi had grown older, but not slower. His once black beard was now flecked with silver, and the sharp suits of his youth had given way to flowing white kaftans with Ankara cuffs, comfortable brown sandals, and the calm demeanor of a man who had finally learned how to listen. Blue Rise Digital was thriving, employing hundreds, sponsoring schools, supporting small street traders like the woman he once mocked. But even as his company grew, the memory of Mama Nkem remained the pulse of everything he did. One rainy afternoon, while cleaning his old office drawers, he found a sealed envelope tucked inside a folder marked Old Records. It was yellowed with age, but the handwriting was unmistakable, Mama Nkem's. Hands trembling, he opened it. Chijioke Nadozi. If you are reading this, it means the wind has carried my words to where they belong. Do not mourn me. The lazy have their work too, though not all work is seen by eyes. I did not save your life that night because you deserved it. I saved it because every man deserves a chance to listen to the wind once more. When you learn that patience feeds the spirit more than haste feeds the pocket, then the wind will rest. Until then, remember, the wind owes no one, but it visits everyone. Mama Nkem. Chijioke closed the letter, tears silently tracing his cheeks. He whispered, "I'm listening now." A week later, a young intern joined Blue Rise. Chica, barely 20, energetic, loud and impatient. She wore jeans with a colorful Ankara crop jacket, bright sneakers, and braids tied with gold beads that jingled when she laughed. At first, she reminded Chijioke of himself when he was young, eager to prove something. But within days, her impatience began to show. She argued with the guards, ignored cleaning staff, and once told the elderly tea woman at the office, "You're too slow, Grandma." That evening, Chijioke called her into his office. She came in chewing gum, twirling her phone, her Ankara jacket slipping off one shoulder. "Yes, sir?" she asked, half bored. He studied her quietly, then pointed toward the window, where the almond tree swayed, its leaves whispering in the soft sunset. "Do you hear that?" he asked. "Hear what?" "The wind." She frowned. "Sir, I don't hear anything." "That's the problem," he said gently. "You're too loud to listen." She blinked, unsure how to respond. He leaned back in his chair. "Do you know the story of Mama Nkem?" She shook her head. "Then sit," he said. For the next hour, he told her everything. How he once called a woman lazy for resting under a tree. How that same woman saved his life a week later. How she vanished, and yet her spirit returned, teaching him humility, patience, and the power of quiet kindness. As he spoke, his voice carried the rhythm of old fireside tales, the kind told beneath moonlight when elders spoke and children leaned in. Chica listened, her gum forgotten, her phone still. When he finished, she whispered, "She sounds like a saint." "She was the wind," he said softly, "and the wind never boasts." He rose, straightened his white caftan, and walked to the window. The tree rustled as if responding. Then he turned to her. "Chica, remember this. Every person you dismiss might be the one who saves you when you least expect it." She nodded, eyes wet. "Yes, sir." From that day, her behavior changed. She greeted everyone with warmth, the cleaners, the guards, the drivers. She carried boxes, helped older workers, and even started a recycling project named Mama and Kem Initiative. Chijioke smiled. The wind had carried its message again. Months later, as the Harmattan wind returned to Adenla, Chijioke fell ill. It wasn't sudden, just the quiet slowing of a man who had finally given all he could. On his final night, the sky outside his window was painted silver with moonlight. The almond tree's branches tapped softly against the glass. He wore his simple white wrapper, Ankara robe, and a coral bead necklace that had once belonged to his father. By his bedside lay the framed almond leaf that read, "The wind remembers." He whispered, "I'm ready." A soft breeze slipped through the open window. It smelled of roasted groundnuts and earth after rain. And in that breeze, he heard her voice again, gentle, amused, eternal. "Chijioke Nadozi, did you learn to listen?" He smiled weakly. "I did, Mama." "Then rest. The wind has found its home." As the curtain fluttered, his breathing slowed. Outside, the almond tree bowed slightly as though paying respect, and when dawn came, the city of Adenla awoke to a wind so soft, so calm, that everyone who felt it paused, just for a second, and smiled without knowing why. Years after his passing, the Mama and Kem Initiative grew into a foundation that trained and supported women street vendors across Africa. At every event, Chica, now the Foundation's director, told the story of the woman once called Lazy, who became the wind that saved a life and changed a city. On the anniversary of Chijioke's death, she stood under the same almond tree, now surrounded by benches, lights, and flowers. She wore a flowing Ankara gown with gold edges, flat sandals, and a turban of crimson and white. The evening wind brushed her face gently. Raising her voice, she told the crowd, "Let this story remind us. Never look down on anyone because their pace is slower than yours. The wind moves at its own speed, yet it reaches everywhere." As she spoke, the wind rose, swirling through the crowd, lifting scarves, stirring dust, carrying laughter. Somewhere in that laughter, those who listened carefully swore they heard an old, familiar chuckle. Moral lesson. The one you call lazy may be carrying a wisdom your eyes are too blind to see. For the woman who rested beneath the tree was not idle. She was patient. She did not chase the world. She let the world come to her. In mocking her, Chijioke mocked the rhythm of life itself. And in being saved by her, he learned that kindness, humility, and patience are the greatest strengths a person can carry. The wind owes no one, yet it remembers those who walk gently upon the earth. So when you see someone resting where others rush, do not call them lazy. Perhaps they are listening to what the wind is trying to tell you. Thanks for watching. If this story touched your heart, don't just scroll away. Pause for a second and breathe it in. Ask yourself, how many people have I judged without understanding their journey? If you believe the world needs more patience, more compassion, and fewer quick judgments, then let's spread this message together. Subscribe to the channel for more deeply moving African folk tales told in a modern voice. Like this video if it inspired you. Comment below and tell me, who is the Mama and Kem in your life, the person whose quiet strength changed everything? Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that no one is ever truly lazy. Sometimes they're just waiting for their wind to rise. Because remember, the wind owes no one, yet it touches everyone. Until the next story, walk gently, listen deeply, and let the wind guide you.